How dare you? Those were the first 3 words I heard on my own front porch, coffee halfway to my lips, and by the time the echo died, there were police lights strobing across our Victorian like it was a crime scene. The caller, the HOA president, a woman in a pink tracksuit who swore we were squatters in her ancestral home. 10 minutes earlier, I'd been planning a lazy Saturday with my wife. 10 minutes later, I was explaining to an officer why my own keys worked in my own front door. We'd bought the place 6 months before, old Wood Goodbones Jasmine from the neighbor's yard creeping over the fence. I'm Jay, software guy, married to Lisa, a night shift nurse with a spine like a steel beam. We were rocking in our chairs, savoring silence, when she appeared at the edge of our lawn, chin tilted like a judge. "How dare you sit there?" she hissed. "You're defiling my ancestral home. This is a sanctuary, not a ghetto stoop." I laughed, at first thought it was a prank, some messed-up neighborhood hazing, but it wasn't. "Ma'am," I said, "this is our home. Deed mortgage keys." She didn't blink. "You people," she said, and started dialing. 2 squatters, she told 911, dangerous, refusing to leave Pendleton Estate. The cruisers slid in with that slow, heavy confidence, and suddenly half the street was peeking through blinds. The younger cop kept his hand near his belt. The older one had that tired, I've-heard-it-all stare. We handed over IDs and a utility bill. Numbers matched, street matched, everything matched. Even the older cop had to admit it. "Your paperwork seems in order." I was already reaching for relief when the woman Agnes Pendleton, she later introduced herself, flung out a hand like a TV lawyer. "Paper is nothing against legacy," she said. "My great-grandfather built this town." The older cop's eyebrow twitched like he recognized the name. They left after a few more questions. No arrests, no tickets, just a warning to keep things civil, but the damage was done. Curtains dropped. Conversations died. We were no longer the nice couple with the rocking chairs. We were a problem. The very next day, the HOA letter hit our mailbox with the subtlety of a brick. Maple Grove Bylaws, Section 4.2, Non-compliant flower pots. Section 5.1, rocking chairs visible from common view. Section 6.1, unauthorized interior alterations that may impact historical features. Fines to accrue, $250 a day, restoration required. An email blast followed subject line. Preserving our heritage. With my house pasted dead center like a mugshot. Words like flippers, multifamily development property values. People who had brought us cookies 6 months ago stopped making eye contact. The guy across the street suddenly found his own lawnmower and never asked to borrow mine again. I appealed because that's what the letter told me to do. Architectural Review Committee. Clubhouse. Tuesday night. Agnes sat at the center of a long folding table like a queen at a banquet, gavel within reach even though there was no reason to gavel anything. I laid out the basics title search permit for minor repairs replacing rotten deck boards. She smiled thinly. "We can always escalate to a civil injunction," she murmured loud enough for the room to hear. I heard the subtext, "If the rules don't work, I'll use something bigger." And then she did. A pale envelope arrived from a law firm with 3 last names. It wasn't HOA at all. It was a lawsuit filed by the Pendleton Historical Preservation Trust claiming the estate had been improperly sold decades ago, due to a clerical error demanding we vacate in 30 days or face damages for historical desecration. Chairwoman Agnes Pendleton. A website appeared out of nowhere, sepia photos of our house, flowery paragraphs about Bartholomew Pendleton's genius, a banner about restoring legacy. If you didn't know any better, it looked official, righteous, inevitable. "We hired a lawyer, Ben Carter." Smart eyes, rumpled suits. "Voice you want on your side." He scanned the letter side. "This smells," he said, "but it's filed. We have to respond." He filed a motion to dismiss. They responded with a wall of paper and a bow-tied historian named Dr. Victor Ainsley, holding what he called Bartholomew's personal journal proof. He said that the house was the Pendleton family's sacred heirloom. The local paper ate it up, heirs of town founder fight to save historic home. We weren't named, just current occupants. A stranger at the grocery store told Lisa she should be ashamed. I watched my wife, my steady, unflappable Lisa, go quiet in the car and stare out the window like there was a crack forming only she could see. Then the judge granted them a preliminary injunction. Not an eviction yet, but a choke collar. We were barred from making any repairs inside or out until the ownership question was resolved. The leaking roof, don't you dare fix it. Worse, the court gave the trust reasonable access for inspection. Reasonable. That word still tastes like rust. They came in a little parade, Agnes and Pearl's now smarmy lawyer, bow-tied historian with a clipboard. They walked through our bedroom. Our kitchen paused over our family photos, tisked at a scuff in the wood, photographed a stack of mail, a dripping faucet, a hairline crack. Bartholomew would be spinning in his grave. Agnes sighed and ran her fingertips over our furniture like she was blessing a relic. Ben told us to smile, to say nothing, to hand them rope and let them knot it themselves. We did. I chewed my tongue until I tasted blood. The HOA piled on. A surprise courtesy inspection cited us for a handrail a quarter-inch too low and an outlet cover with a crack. I stopped sleeping. Lisa's chest got tight on the stairs and she blamed allergies. The house that had felt like sanctuary now felt like a stage where I was forced to stand while people graded me. I started questioning everything. Was I rash to fight proud? To a fault, naive to think a deed stands up to a myth when a myth has money behind it. Ben called us in. He laid out a settlement offer, eyes tired. The trust would buy the house from us for exactly what we'd paid, not a dollar more. No closing costs, no moving credits, no reimbursement for legal fees. A non-disclosure agreement so airtight it might as well be duct tape over our mouths. It's a bad offer, Ben said, but the judge is leaning their way. A full trial will be $50,000 easy. This is a way out. We drove home in silence and sat at the kitchen table without turning on the light. The injunction had forbidden us from fixing the leak, and there was a brown halo in the plaster above us like the house itself was bruised. Maybe we should take it, Lisa whispered finally, voice barely there. I'd never heard defeat in her mouth before. It scared me. We could start over. I can't live with people in our bedroom, in our drawers, in our lives. I wanted to be brave. I wanted to slam my fist and say absolutely not, but I was exhausted and scared and angry and small. I nodded. Tomorrow, I said, we'll sign. I wandered the house that night like a ghost, touching door frames, memorizing doorknobs. I ended up in the small study at the back, the one with the hideous 1970s wallpaper I'd begun to strip before the injunction nailed my hands to my sides. I ran my palm over the exposed plaster and something caught a dead straight hairline near the baseboard. I pressed. Nothing. I pressed again harder. A click. A square panel popped inward. My heart went sideways in my chest. Behind it, a cavity. Inside, a metal box the size of a shoebox, heavy and rusted. The clasp disintegrated when I touched it. Under the lid, a leather-bound journal, bundles of letters tied with ribbon, brittle documents with county seals and dates from the 1890s, all arranged like someone had packed a life and then hidden it inside a wall. The first page of this journal stopped me dead. 1898. I have today purchased the lumber and stone to begin construction of my new home, a testament not to wealth but to the freedom I have found. Signed, not Bartholomew. Signed, Silas Webb, a carpenter, the son of a man who'd been born into bondage. The original deed in the stack said the land went to Silas in 1897. Bartholomew's name didn't appear until a promissory note years later with terms that looked less like help and more like a trap. I called Lisa. We sat on the floor and read until dawn, sketches of the staircase notes about the floorboards in the dining room, and at the end, a line that lodged in my ribs. He has taken my house, but he cannot take the truth. The truth is in the walls, is in. We didn't sign anything. We showed Ben everything. He didn't smile, he bared his teeth. He sent the journal letters and documents to a paper and ink specialist, to a handwriting analyst, to a historian who actually knew the era. He hired a genealogist who days later called with a tremble in her voice Silas had descendants. an elderly great-granddaughter named Eleanor Vance and her son David, a history professor. Ben told us to shut our mouths and wait. We deploy this at the injunction hearing, he said, not in a filing that gives them time to invent a new lie. We need to hit them in the open where the judge can see the truth land. So we waited. Agnes kept working the neighborhood, walking her tiny dog and casting spells with words like heritage and values. The Hendersons, our next-door rocks, stood on our porch when they saw us outside loud on purpose. They sold that place off in the Depression, Evelyn told me over the fence. Pendleton's myth is convenient, not true. I nodded, like I believed it could matter. The morning of the hearing was gray and cold, the kind that makes everything sound louder. The courtroom was small, full, and humming with that low, hungry curiosity people feel when something messy might happen. Agnes looked expensive and victorious. Dr. Ainsley sat prim as a lecture hall. The judge glanced over his glasses, leaning toward them like a friend. Their lawyer went first. Monroe, clean jaw, nice suit. Voice like varnish talked about preservation legacy, the terrible danger we posed to original features. He called Ainsley, who cradled the Pendleton Journal, like a relic. Without a shadow of a doubt, the good doctor said this home is the creation of Bartholomew Pendleton. Ben stood unhurried, almost bored. "Doctor," he said, "as an expert you understand the power of primary sources. You're certain that journal is the definitive account?" "Absolutely," Ainsley said, chin high. "And the builder was Bartholomew beyond question." Ben looked at the judge. "Your Honor, the plaintiffs have staked their case on primary sources. We agree they matter. The court deserves to see the primary source." He turned, picked up a single book from our table, and set it in front of Ainsley. "Have you seen this?" The bow tie bobbed. Pages turned. Color drained. He tried to speak and produced a squeak. You don't recognize the handwriting of the man who actually built that house?" Ben asked softly. The room rippled. Agnes made a sound like a kettle boiled dry. The judge's eyebrows for the first time lifted. Ben called our expert. The analysis was clinical and devastating. The ink and paper from the Silas Journal were period correct. The pendulum of aging on the fibers matched the 1900s. The handwriting in the journal matched the letters, matched the deed signature. The Pendleton Journal. Modern ink components, artificial aging, traces handwriting inconsistencies like someone trying to mimic a dead man with a shaky hand. Perjury in a hardback cover, and then Ben did the thing I didn't know he had planned. He turned to the back of the room. "Your Honor," he said, "history is not just paper, it's people. I would like to introduce Mrs. Eleanor Vance, great-granddaughter of Silas Webb." The air thinned. The doors opened. Eleanor walked in on her grandson's arm, small straight face lined in a way that commands attention without asking. Agnes went statue still, then exploded. "Lies," she shrieked, lunging to her feet. "All lies. Trick's fraud. This is my birthright, my house." The judge's gavel cracked the wood like thunder. "Order." Agnes kept going, spit bright on her lips. "You people have no history." "Enough," the judge said, and the bailiff took a step. Agnes yanked her arm free, pointed at Eleanor like she could stab her from across the room. "Get out of my house." It was feral, naked, and finally unmistakable. Ben didn't grandstand. He didn't need to. He put the promissory note on the screen, Bartholomew's terms in black and white. He read a paragraph of Silas's last entry voice. "Steady, he has taken my house, but he cannot take the truth." He handed the judge copies of the expert reports like laying bricks. He asked for the injunction to be dissolved and the case dismissed with prejudice. He asked the court to consider sanctions for a fraud practiced upon it. He asked the court politely to stop letting a myth beat a deed. The judge leaned back and stared at the ceiling for a long moment. When he looked down, his expression had changed from indulgent to cold. He turned to Monroe. "Counselor, you and I will be speaking in chambers about your evidentiary choices." He looked at Agnes. Miss Pendleton, sit down, or you will be removed. She didn't sit. She opened her mouth again, and that was it. The bailiff moved hands on her elbows, and she was half dragged, half walked down the aisle, voice crumbling into incoherent fury. The door shut behind her, and the silence that followed felt like the first breath after being underwater too long. Motion to dismiss is granted, the judge said. With prejudice. Injunction dissolved effective immediately. The court will refer the matter of fraudulent evidence to the appropriate authorities. He paused, eyes on us for the first time, and there was something like apology there. This court regrets being used. I didn't smile. I didn't gasp. I looked down at my keyring in my hand and realized I'd been squeezing it hard enough to leave little crescents in my palm. Lisa's fingers found mine under the table and gripped back a silent, sharp reminder that we were still here. We packed our papers. We stood. Reporters were a muffled buzz on the other side of the door, but I couldn't hear them yet. I heard only the gavel's echo fading and the sound of Agnes's last word, mine, vanishing into the hallway like steam. Truth is a foundation. If you build on lies, it will crack.